My husband chewed his food exactly 23 times before swallowing. I know this because I've watched him do it for 35 years. Last Christmas Eve, while he was chewing bite number 47 of his pot roast, I counted every single chew and I thought, this is what my life has become. A woman who counts her husband's chews because she has nothing left to say to him. We hadn't fought in 15 years. Isn't that supposed to be a good thing? Everyone said we were relationship goals. Successful. Stable. Still together after all these years. But nobody tells you that sometimes the worst kind of marriage isn't the one with screaming and broken dishes. It's the one where you sit 3 feet apart and feel like you're on different planets. I'm Trish. And I'm going to tell you what happened when I finally broke the silence. Welcome to Drama Coda. This story gets wild, so stick with me till the end. Hit that like button and tell me in the comments, rate this story 1 to 10 when it's all over. Let me take you back to where it all started to fall apart. Or maybe where it started to come together. I still can't tell which one is true. It was December 23rd. The Christmas tree was up in our living room in Charleston, the same tree we'd had for 12 years because Donald said there was no point buying a new one when the old one still worked. That's how he thought about everything. If it's not broken, why fix it? Our marriage wasn't broken, you see. It was just empty. But empty doesn't count as broken when you're a practical man like Donald Anderson, dentist, deacon at First Baptist, owner of a paid-off 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood where everyone waves at each other and nobody asks real questions. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when I heard him come home. His car door shutting. His keys in the bowl by the front door. His footsteps, the same pattern every single day for 35 years. He didn't call out hello. I didn't call out welcome home. We'd stopped doing that somewhere around the year 2005, and neither of us noticed when it happened. I heard the TV click on. The evening news. Always the evening news. Then I heard him settle into his recliner, the leather creaking under his weight. And I stood there holding one of his undershirts, crisp and white and perfectly folded, and I thought, I cannot do this for another 20 years. You want to know something nobody tells you about marriage? It's not the big things that kill it. It's not affairs or money problems or screaming matches. It's the slow fade. It's the way you stop reaching for each other in bed. It's the way conversations become grocery lists and schedule coordination. It's the way you look at this person you promised forever to and realize you don't actually know who they are anymore. Or worse, you realize you do know who they are, and you don't particularly like them. Donald was a good man. Let me be clear about that. He never hit me. Never cheated, as far as I knew. Never gambled away our savings or came home drunk or did any of the things that would have given me a clear reason to leave. He provided. He showed up. He was faithful. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me. And I stopped seeing him. We became roommates who shared a last name and a mortgage. Our kids were coming home for Christmas. Sarah, our oldest, 33, married to a software engineer, 2 kids of her own. Michael, 31, engaged to a lovely girl named Amanda. And Jenny, our baby, 28, still finding her way, working as a nurse in Atlanta. They were all coming home. And they were all going to sit around our dining room table and talk about their lives, and Donald would nod and make appropriate comments, and I would serve the food and smile, and nobody would notice that their parents hadn't had a real conversation in 2 decades. I put down the undershirt. I walked to my closet. And in the back, behind my winter coats, I pulled out a shoebox. Inside that shoebox were things I'd hidden over the years. A journal I'd kept in my 40s when I first realized I was unhappy. Letters I'd written to Donald but never sent. A brochure for a divorce attorney I'd picked up 7 years ago and then chickened out. And at the bottom, a photograph. The photograph was from our 10th anniversary. We'd gone to Myrtle Beach, just the two of us. The kids were with Donald's mother. In the photo, we're on the beach at sunset. His arm is around me. I'm leaning into him. We're both smiling, really smiling, not the fake smiles we perfected for Christmas cards. I remembered that trip. I remembered how he'd kissed me in the ocean. How we'd made love that night like we were still newlyweds. How I thought, okay, we're going to be okay, we just needed this time together. That was 25 years ago. And it was the last time I remembered feeling like he wanted me, not just needed me to be there. I sat on the floor of my closet holding that photograph and I cried. Not the pretty crying you see in movies. The ugly kind. The kind where you can't breathe and your whole body shakes and you're not even sure what you're crying for anymore. I cried for the girl in that photograph who thought love was enough. I cried for all the years I'd wasted pretending I was fine. I cried for the woman I'd become, the one who counted her husband's chews at dinner because she had nothing better to think about. And then I stopped crying. I wiped my face. I put the photograph back in the box. And I made a decision. I was going to tell him. I was going to tell Donald that I wanted a divorce. Not after Christmas. Not after the kids left. On Christmas morning, with everyone there, I was going to say the words that had been stuck in my throat for 20 years. You're probably thinking I'm crazy. Who does that? Who ruins Christmas? Who tells their family they're getting divorced on the one day of the year when everyone's supposed to be happy and grateful and together? But here's what I realized sitting on that closet floor. If I didn't do it then, I never would. I'd chicken out again. I'd tell myself it wasn't the right time. I'd wait for another year, and another, until I was 80 years old and wondering where my life went. I needed witnesses. I needed accountability. I needed to say it out loud in front of people who loved me so I couldn't take it back. That night, Donald and I ate dinner in silence. He chewed his pot roast 23 times per bite. I counted every single one. After dinner, he went back to his recliner. I went to the kitchen and started baking cookies for Christmas, the same recipe I'd used for 35 years. Chocolate chip. Donald's favorite. I don't even like chocolate chip cookies, but I'd been making them for so long I forgot I had a choice. I mixed the dough and I thought about what I was going to say. How do you tell someone you've spent most of your life with that you don't want to spend another day with them? How do you explain that you're not leaving because you hate them, but because staying is killing you? Around 10 o'clock, Donald came into the kitchen. He stood in the doorway watching me drop cookie dough onto the baking sheet. And then he said something that almost broke me. He said, "You're a good wife, Trish." Just like that. You're a good wife. Not "you're amazing," or "I love you," or "I don't know what I'd do without you." You're a good wife. Like I was an appliance that worked properly. Like I was a car that hadn't broken down yet. I didn't turn around. I just said thank you. And he went to bed. I stayed up until 2 in the morning baking cookies and crying and rehearsing what I was going to say. When I finally went to bed, Donald was snoring. He was on his side of the bed. I was on mine. There was a good 2 feet of space between us. There had been for years. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and I thought about all the things that had led me to this moment. It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 little things. It was the way he'd stopped complimenting me. The way he'd stopped asking about my day. The way he'd stopped initiating sex, and when I initiated, he acted like it was a chore. It was the way he'd stopped laughing at my jokes. The way he'd stopped seeing me at all. But it was also my fault. I'd let it happen. I'd stopped trying too. I'd stopped wearing makeup around the house. I'd stopped planning date nights. I'd stopped fighting for us because I was too tired, and then I was too numb, and then I just didn't care anymore. Marriage is a choice you make every single day. And somewhere along the way, both of us stopped choosing each other. We just existed in the same space, living parallel lives that never intersected. Christmas Eve morning came. The kids arrived throughout the day. Sarah and her family pulled up first, her 2 boys bursting through our front door with all the energy of children who'd been cooped up in a car for 3 hours. Michael and Amanda arrived next, their arms full of presents and wine and Amanda's famous cheesecake. Jenny got in late afternoon, looking tired from her shift at the hospital but smiling, always smiling, my baby girl. The house filled with noise and laughter and life. The grandkids ran around. The adults talked and drank wine and caught up. Donald was in his element. He loved having the kids home. He was a different person with them, warmer, more engaged. It made me wonder if the problem wasn't the marriage, but me. If he just didn't love me specifically anymore. That night we all went to the Christmas Eve service at church. We sat in our usual pew, the Anderson family, all dressed up and looking perfect. People smiled at us. The pastor mentioned how wonderful it was to see families together for the holidays. And I sat there thinking, tomorrow I'm going to blow all of this up. After church, we came home and did our traditional Christmas Eve activities. We watched a Christmas movie. We let the grandkids open 1 present each. We drank hot chocolate. And the whole time, my heart was pounding because I knew what was coming. Around 11, everyone started heading to bed. The grandkids were sleeping in the guest room. Sarah and her husband took the fold-out couch in the den. Michael and Amanda got Jenny's old room. Jenny took Michael's old room. And Donald and I went to our bedroom, the master suite we'd shared for 35 years. I lay in bed next to my husband on Christmas Eve and I knew it was the last time. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow I would finally tell the truth. Tomorrow I would choose myself. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke up to light coming through the curtains and the smell of coffee. Donald was already up. I could hear voices downstairs. The grandkids were awake, probably tearing into their stockings. I got out of bed. I put on my bathrobe, the blue one Donald gave me 5 years ago. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I was 61 years old. I had gray hair that I'd stopped dyeing 3 years ago because Donald said it didn't matter and I realized I agreed with him. I had wrinkles around my eyes and mouth. I had age spots on my hands. I looked like somebody's grandmother. Because I was somebody's grandmother. But I was also still me. Patricia Anderson. Trish. The girl who'd wanted to be a writer but became a teacher instead. The woman who'd dreamed of traveling the world but never made it past Florida. The person who'd spent 35 years making herself smaller and smaller to fit into a marriage that didn't have room for who I really was. I went downstairs. The living room was chaos. Wrapping paper everywhere. The grandkids were playing with their new toys. Sarah was making breakfast in the kitchen. Michael was helping Donald set up some complicated gadget one of the boys had gotten. Amanda and Jenny were on the couch looking at something on Amanda's phone. It was a perfect Christmas morning. Exactly like every other Christmas morning we'd had for the past 33 years. I poured myself a cup of coffee. I sat down at the dining room table. And I waited. Sarah called everyone for breakfast around 9. We all gathered around the table, the big table that Donald's father had built, the table where we'd had thousands of meals as a family. Sarah had made a spread. Eggs and bacon and biscuits and gravy and fresh fruit. Everyone was talking and laughing, and the grandkids were hyper from sugar and excitement. I looked around the table. At my children, who I loved more than anything. At my grandchildren, who were the light of my life. At my husband, who was buttering his biscuit and nodding at something Michael was saying about work. And I opened my mouth. And the words came out. I said, I need to tell you all something. The table got quiet. Everyone looked at me. Sarah had this little smile on her face, like she thought I was about to announce I'd gotten a new job or taken up a new hobby. Michael looked curious. Jenny looked worried. She always could read me better than the others. Donald looked confused. I said, I'm filing for divorce. Just like that. 4 words. I'm filing for divorce. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. You could have heard a pin drop. The grandkids kept playing in the living room, oblivious. But at the table, everyone had frozen. Sarah's smile disappeared. Her face went white. Michael's mouth actually fell open. Jenny's eyes filled with tears. And Donald just stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Finally, Sarah said, What? Mom, what are you talking about? Is this a joke? I said, It's not a joke. I'm leaving. I'm sorry to do this on Christmas, but I needed to say it and I needed you all to hear it. Donald found his voice. He said, Trish, what the hell? Where is this coming from? And I looked at my husband, this man I'd been married to for 35 years, and I said, Donald, when's the last time you told me you loved me? He just stared at me. He didn't have an answer. I said, when's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about the bills or the schedule or what needs to be fixed around the house? When's the last time you looked at me, really looked at me, and saw me? He said, I don't understand what's happening right now. And that was the problem. He didn't understand. He had no idea that I'd been drowning in this marriage for 20 years. He was perfectly happy with our arrangement. He had a clean house and hot meals and someone to sit next to at church. What more could he want? But I wanted more. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be desired. I wanted to feel alive again before I died. Michael said, Mom, you can't be serious. You and Dad are solid. You guys never even fight. I said, that's the problem, honey. We don't fight because we don't care enough to fight. We're not a marriage anymore. We're just 2 people living in the same house. Jenny was crying now. She said, Mom, I don't understand. Did something happen? Did Dad do something? And that's when I had to explain the hardest part. That Donald hadn't done anything wrong. That he wasn't a bad husband. That this wasn't about blame or anger or betrayal. It was about the fact that we both stopped trying somewhere along the way, and now we were just going through the motions, and I couldn't do it anymore. I said, Your father is a good man. But we haven't been in love for a very long time. And I'm 61 years old. I don't know how many years I have left. And I can't spend them pretending to be happy when I'm not. Donald stood up. His face was red. He said, So that's it? You're just going to throw away 35 years? You're going to destroy our family on Christmas morning? I said, I'm not destroying our family. I'm trying to save myself. He said, This is selfish, Trish. This is the most selfish thing you've ever done. And you know what? He was right. It was selfish. Absolutely selfish. I was choosing me over the comfort of everyone else. I was prioritizing my happiness over maintaining the status quo. And I wasn't sorry about it. Sarah was crying now too. She said, "Mom, maybe you and Dad should try counseling. Maybe you're just going through a phase. Maybe this is just, I don't know, a midlife crisis or something." I wanted to laugh. A midlife crisis at 61? Honey, if this was my midlife, I was planning to live to be 122. I said, "We're past counseling. I've been thinking about this for 20 years. This isn't a rash decision. This is the most thought-out decision I've ever made." Michael said, "Think about the grandkids. Think about family holidays. Think about what this is going to do to everyone." And I said, "I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else for months. But I can't keep living a lie because it's more comfortable for everyone else. You kids are grown. You have your own lives. And that's good. That's how it should be. But now it's my turn. Now I get to choose what I want." Donald said, "And what you want is to leave me." I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd shared my entire adult life with. And I said, "What I want is to feel something again. And I can't do that here." The breakfast was ruined. Sarah gathered up her kids and her husband and they left. They barely said goodbye. Michael and Amanda left right after. They were all shocked and angry and confused. Jenny stayed. She sat with me on the couch after everyone else had gone and she held my hand and she said, "Mom, are you sure about this?" I said, "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She said, "Are you going to be okay?" I said, "I think so. Eventually." She said, "I love you. Even if I don't understand this, I love you." And that was all I needed to hear. Donald didn't speak to me for the rest of Christmas Day. He went to his brother's house. I stayed home. I sat in the quiet house surrounded by wrapping paper and half-eaten breakfast and the ruins of Christmas morning, and I felt free for the first time in decades. The next week was brutal. Donald was furious. The kids were hurt. My friends from church were scandalized. How could I leave such a good man? How could I break up a family? Didn't I know how lucky I was to have a husband who'd stuck around? But nobody asked me if I was happy. Nobody asked me what I needed. Nobody asked me what it felt like to slowly disappear inside a marriage that looked perfect from the outside but felt like a prison on the inside. I moved out in January. I found a little beachfront condo in Mount Pleasant, nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with a view of the water. I took my books and my clothes and a few pieces of furniture and I left everything else behind. Donald could have the house, the furniture, all of it. I didn't want anything that reminded me of those 35 years. The divorce took 8 months to finalize. Donald fought me on every single thing. Not because he wanted me back, but because he was angry. He felt betrayed. He felt like I'd wasted his time. In his mind, we'd had a deal, and I'd broken it. But in my mind, the deal had been broken long ago. We just hadn't admitted it. Sarah came around first. She called me in March and said, "Mom, I've been thinking about what you said. About not feeling seen. And I realized, I don't think I've ever seen you and Dad be affectionate. I don't think I've ever seen you light up around each other. I just always thought that's what marriage becomes." I said, "It doesn't have to be." She said, "Are you happy now?" I said, "I'm getting there." Michael took longer. He didn't speak to me until July. When he finally called, he said, "Dad told me he's dating someone. Some woman from his dental practice." And I realized, he moved on really fast, Mom. Like, really fast. And it made me wonder if maybe things weren't as good as I thought they were. I didn't tell Michael that Donald moving on quickly proved my point. That our marriage had been over for years, we'd just been too stubborn or too scared to end it. I just said, "I hope your father finds happiness." And I meant it. I wasn't angry at Donald anymore. I was just sad for us. Sad that we'd wasted so many years being unhappy together instead of being happy apart. Jenny never stopped supporting me. She came to visit me at the condo once a month. We'd sit on the balcony and watch the ocean and talk about everything. She told me about her work, about the guy she was seeing, about her dreams and fears. And I told her things I'd never told my children before. About who I was before I became their mother. About the things I'd given up. About the person I wanted to become. One day in April, I was at the grocery store buying food for one, which felt strange after decades of cooking for a family. I was in the produce section trying to figure out how many tomatoes one person needs when a man's voice said, "You look like you're contemplating the mysteries of the universe over there." I looked up. He was tall, probably my age, with gray hair and kind eyes and a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He was wearing a Marines t-shirt. I laughed. I said, "Just trying to figure out how to shop for one person. It's harder than it looks." He said, "Tell me about it." "I've been doing it for 3 years and I still buy too much food." We started talking. His name was Ernest. "Ernie," he said, "everyone calls me Ernie." He was 64. A retired Marine. A widower. His wife had died 3 years ago from cancer. He'd loved her deeply, he told me later, and losing her nearly destroyed him. But he'd worked through his grief and now he was learning how to live again. We talked in that grocery store for 20 minutes. When we finally said goodbye, he asked if he could call me sometime. I gave him my number without hesitating. Our first date was coffee. Just coffee at a little cafe near the water. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his time in the Marines. I told him about my years as a school principal. He told me about his wife. I told him about my marriage. We were both honest. Raw. Real. At the end, he said, "I'd like to see you again, if you're interested." I said, "I'd like that too." We took it slow. Neither of us was in a rush. We'd both learned that life is long and love is complicated and sometimes the best thing you can do is just enjoy the present moment without worrying about what comes next. Ernie was different from Donald in every way. He asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. He remembered little things I told him. He complimented me, not just on how I looked but on my thoughts, my opinions, my sense of humor. He made me laugh. God, he made me laugh so much. When he kissed me for the first time, it was in June, on the beach at sunset. We'd been walking along the water and talking about our favorite books and he just stopped and turned to me and said, "I really want to kiss you right now, if that's okay." I said, "It's okay." And when his lips touched mine, I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. I felt desired. I felt seen. I felt alive. We didn't rush into anything physical. We were both older, both carrying scars from our past relationships. But when we finally made love, it was in August, in my little condo with the windows open and the sound of the ocean in the background, and it was beautiful. Not because it was perfect or because either of us had perfect bodies anymore. But because it was real. Because we chose each other. Because we wanted to be there. My divorce was finalized in September. Ernie took me out to dinner to celebrate. He said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Free." He raised his glass. He said, "To freedom. And to second chances." We clinked glasses and I thought, this is what I was looking for. Not another marriage. Not someone to complete me. Just someone who sees me. Someone who chooses me. Someone who makes me want to be fully myself. That Christmas, my second Christmas as a divorced woman, was different. The kids all came to my condo. It was cramped, nothing like the big house they'd grown up in. We had to eat in shifts because my little dining table only sat 4. But it was full of love. Real love, not the fake kind we'd been performing for years. I introduced them to Ernie. He came over for dessert on Christmas night. He brought his famous chocolate pie and he charmed all 3 of my kids within 10 minutes. He talked to Michael about his work. He complimented Amanda's engagement ring. He made Sarah's kids laugh with silly jokes. And he held my hand under the table where no one could see. After everyone left, after the kids had driven back to their lives and Ernie had gone home and I was alone in my little condo, I sat on my balcony and looked at the ocean and I cried. But this time, I was crying because I was happy. Because I'd done it. Because I'd chosen myself and it had been scary and painful and hard, but I'd survived. More than survived. I was thriving. Let me tell you what I learned from all of this. From 35 years in a dead marriage and 1 year of learning how to live again. I learned that staying in a bad situation doesn't make you noble. It just makes you stuck. I learned that love isn't just commitment and showing up. Love is choosing to see the other person every single day. Love is effort and attention and desire. Love is work, but it's work that should make you feel more alive, not less. I learned that it's never too late to start over. Never. I was 61 years old when I left my marriage. 61. And people acted like my life was over, like I was too old to want more, too old to deserve happiness. But you know what? I'm 62 now and I'm happier than I've ever been. I wake up every morning excited about the day. I go to bed every night grateful for my life. That never happened in my marriage. I learned that you can't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. My kids were upset when I left Donald. My friends were scandalized. My church community whispered about me. But none of those people were living my life. None of them had to wake up every morning next to someone who didn't see them. None of them had to slowly disappear inside a marriage that looked perfect on paper but felt like death in practice. I learned that endings aren't always failures. Sometimes an ending is the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and everyone around you is to admit that something isn't working and walk away. I learned that you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. I accepted being invisible for 20 years. I accepted being treated like an appliance. I accepted crumbs of affection and called it love. And Donald didn't do anything wrong, he just gave me what I accepted. When I finally demanded more, when I finally said I deserved to be seen and heard and desired, everything changed. I learned that guilt is a useless emotion when you're making the right choice for yourself. Yes, I felt guilty about hurting my kids. Yes, I felt guilty about ruining Christmas. Yes, I felt guilty about leaving a man who hadn't technically done anything wrong. But guilt doesn't mean you're making the wrong choice. Sometimes guilt just means you're making a hard choice. And hard choices are still necessary. I learned that happiness is not selfish. We tell women, especially mothers, that putting themselves first is selfish. That their needs should always come last. That sacrifice is noble and self-care is indulgent. But you know what happens when you spend your whole life putting everyone else first? You disappear. You become a shell of a person. And then you can't give anything real to anyone because there's nothing left of you to give. I learned that you don't need someone else to complete you, but having someone who truly sees you makes life sweeter. Ernie didn't save me. I saved myself. But having him in my life, having someone who values me and desires me and chooses me every day, that's a gift. That's what partnership should be. Not two half people trying to make a whole. But two whole people choosing to share their lives. I learned that your children are more resilient than you think. My kids were devastated at first. They thought I was destroying the family. But you know what happened? They adjusted. They adapted. And eventually, they started to understand. Sarah told me last month that watching me choose myself gave her permission to ask for more in her own marriage. She and her husband started going to counseling. They started really talking to each other again. My choice to leave gave her the courage to fight for her marriage in a way she hadn't before. Michael told me he and Amanda talked seriously about what they wanted their marriage to look like before they got married. He said, "I don't want to end up like you and Dad. I want to make sure we're still choosing each other 20 years from now." And I said, "Good. Learn from my mistakes." Jenny said, "Mom, you taught me that I don't have to settle. That I should never stay with someone just because it's easier than leaving. That I deserve to be with someone who lights up when I walk in the room." I taught my children something by leaving. I taught them that it's okay to change your mind. That it's okay to want more. That it's okay to choose yourself, even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. I learned that community isn't about judgment, it's about support. I lost some friends when I left Donald. People from church who thought I was making a terrible mistake. People who valued the appearance of a perfect marriage more than the reality of my happiness. But I also found new friends. Women from my book club who'd been through divorces of their own. Neighbors in my condo building who were also starting over. People who understood that life is messy and complicated and sometimes the right choice looks wrong from the outside. I learned that you don't owe anyone an explanation for your choices. In the beginning, I tried to make everyone understand why I was leaving. I tried to explain to Donald, to my kids, to my friends. I tried to justify myself. But eventually I realized, I don't need anyone's permission to leave a situation that's making me miserable. I don't need anyone to agree with my choice. I just need to make the choice and live with the consequences. And the consequences have been beautiful. They've also been hard. But they've been mine. That's the thing about choosing yourself. The life you build afterward might not be perfect, but it's authentic. It's real. It's yours. Here's what I want you to understand if you're in a marriage like mine was. If you're in a relationship where you feel invisible. Where you're going through the motions. Where you can't remember the last time your partner really saw you or you really saw them. It's not going to get better on its own. I know you want to believe it will. I know you're thinking, maybe if I just try harder, maybe if I'm more patient, maybe if I give it more time. But time doesn't fix a dead relationship. Time just makes you older and more stuck and more resigned to a life you don't actually want. You have 3 choices. You can stay and keep pretending. You can stay and actually fight to revive what you had. Or you can leave. If you choose to stay and keep pretending, that's your choice. But know what you're signing up for. You're signing up for more years of counting your partner's chews at dinner because you have nothing to say to each other. More years of sleeping 3 feet apart in the same bed. More years of being a ghost in your own life. If you choose to stay and fight, then really fight. Go to counseling. Have the hard conversations. Tell your partner the truth about how unhappy you are. Demand more. Ask for what you need. Be willing to blow up the pretense of the perfect marriage to build something real. But both of you have to want it. You can't revive a relationship alone. If you choose to leave, know that it's going to be hard. People are going to judge you. Your family might not understand. You're going to doubt yourself 1,000 times. You're going to feel guilty and scared and unsure. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that guilt is a life that's actually yours. I can't tell you what to choose. Only you know what's right for you. Only you know what you can live with and what you can't. Only you know if there's anything left to save or if you're just mourning something that died a long time ago. But I can tell you this. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be desired. You deserve to be with someone who chooses you every single day, not just once 30 years ago. You deserve to feel alive. And if you're not feeling those things in your current relationship, something needs to change. Maybe that change is within the relationship. Maybe you and your partner can find your way back to each other. I hope so. I really do. I hope you can have the conversations I never had with Donald. I hope you can rebuild what's broken instead of walking away from it. But if you can't, if you've tried everything and nothing works, if you're just too far gone to find your way back, then please know it's okay to leave. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to say, I deserve more than this and I'm brave enough to go find it. You're not too old. You're not too stuck. You're not too anything. You're just scared. And that's okay. But don't let fear keep you in a life that's killing you slowly. I was 61 when I left. 61. And people kept saying, what are you going to do now? Like my life was over. Like I was just going to wait around to die. But you know what I did? I moved to the beach. I joined a book club. I started taking watercolor classes. I learned to kayak. I fell in love again. I became myself again. And it all started with counting my husband's chews at dinner and realizing I couldn't do it anymore. Let me tell you about what the first year after divorce was really like. Because I don't want to paint this picture like I left Donald and immediately everything was sunshine and roses and I was skipping through fields of flowers. That's not how it works. Real life is messier than that. The first 3 months were the hardest. I'd wake up in my little condo and for a split second I'd forget where I was. I'd reach for Donald's side of the bed out of habit and find empty space. Not because I missed him specifically, but because I missed the routine. 35 years of routine is hard to break, even when the routine was killing you. I had moments of panic. Like, what did I just do? I threw away my whole life. I destroyed my family. I'm going to die alone in this condo and no one's going to find me for weeks. You know, the cheerful thoughts you have at 3 in the morning when you can't sleep. I had to learn how to do everything alone. How to pay bills that had always been Donald's responsibility. How to fix things around the house. How to make decisions without consulting someone else. How to just be with myself without distraction. That last one was the hardest. When you've been part of a couple for 35 years, you forget who you are as an individual. You define yourself by your relationship. I was Donald's wife. I was Sarah and Michael and Jenny's mom. I was the principal at Charleston Elementary. But who was I, just me, without all those labels? I spent a lot of time that first year figuring that out. I started keeping a journal again, something I hadn't done since my 40s. I wrote down things I liked. Things I didn't like. Dreams I'd given up on. Things I wanted to try. It sounds simple, but it was revolutionary. I'd spent so many years not even asking myself what I wanted. I just did what needed to be done. I discovered I didn't actually like chocolate chip cookies. Donald's favorite. But I'd been baking them for 35 years without ever questioning it. I discovered I loved spicy food, which Donald hated, so I'd stopped cooking it decades ago. I discovered I liked staying up late and sleeping in, instead of going to bed at 9:30 and waking up at 6 like clockwork. I discovered I liked quiet. Long stretches of beautiful quiet where I could just think and read and exist without having to perform for anyone. I also discovered loneliness. Real loneliness. The kind that sits in your chest like a rock. I'd been lonely in my marriage, but it was a different kind of lonely. It was the loneliness of being invisible to someone who saw you every day. But this new loneliness was the absence of another person entirely. And some days, it was crushing. That's when I started going to the book club. It was held at the local library, every other Tuesday night. I almost didn't go to the first meeting. I stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes convincing myself to walk in. But I did. And it changed everything. There were 8 women in the group. All different ages, different backgrounds, different stories. But we all loved books. We all loved talking about stories and characters and what they meant. And slowly, over weeks and then months, we started talking about our own stories too. There was Linda, 55, who'd left her husband after she caught him having an affair with his secretary. Classic story, she said with a laugh, but it still hurts like hell. There was Margaret, 72, who'd been widowed for 10 years and was finally learning how to be happy alone. There was Keisha, 48, who'd never been married and said she was perfectly content with that choice. Thank you very much. There was Rachel, 34, going through a brutal divorce with 2 small kids. We became friends. Real friends. The kind of friends who show up when you're having a bad day with wine and chocolate and no judgment. The kind of friends who celebrate your wins and mourn your losses and tell you the truth even when it's hard to hear. Linda was the one who convinced me to try online dating. She said, "Trish, you're not dead yet. You're allowed to want companionship. You're allowed to want romance. You're allowed to want sex, for God's sake." I laughed. I said, "I'm 61 years old. Who's going to want to date me?" She said, "You'd be surprised. There are a lot of good men out there looking for women exactly like you. Smart, independent, done with the bullshit." I didn't do online dating. The thought of it terrified me. But her words stuck with me. I'm allowed to want things. That seems so basic, but it was revolutionary for me. I'd spent so long not wanting anything that I'd forgotten I had permission to want. That's how I was open to Ernie when I met him in the grocery store. A year earlier, I would have smiled politely and walked away. But I'd been doing the work. I'd been learning who I was again. I'd been learning that I deserved good things. So when this kind, handsome man struck up a conversation with me over tomatoes, I let myself flirt a little. I let myself be interested. I let myself say yes when he asked for my number. Our relationship developed slowly, like I said. We were both cautious. Both damaged in our own ways. He'd lost his wife to cancer. He'd watched her suffer for 2 years. He'd held her hand while she died. That kind of loss changes you. Makes you careful with your heart. And I was coming out of 35 years in a dead marriage. I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. What if I was just jumping from one bad situation to another? What if I was just looking for someone to fill the void? What if I couldn't actually be in a healthy relationship because I didn't know what that looked like? Ernie and I talked about all of this. That's one thing I loved about him from the start. He wasn't afraid of real conversations. We talked about our fears and our scars and our hopes. We talked about what we wanted from a relationship and what we didn't want. We talked about our past mistakes and what we'd learned from them. He told me early on, I'm not looking to replace my wife. Nobody could replace her. But I'm also not going to spend the rest of my life alone because I'm afraid to love again. My wife wouldn't have wanted that. I told him, I'm not looking for someone to take care of me or complete me. I'm looking for someone who sees me. Someone who chooses me. Someone who makes me want to be more myself, not less. He said, I can do that. And he did. God, he did. One of my favorite memories from that first year with Ernie was in July. We'd been dating for about 3 months. We went kayaking together, something I'd always wanted to try but Donald thought was too dangerous. We rented kayaks and paddled out into the marsh at sunset. The water was calm and golden and beautiful. We didn't talk much. We just paddled and watched the birds and existed in that perfect moment. At one point, Ernie paddled up next to me and said, "You look happy." I said, "I am happy." He said, "Good. You deserve to be happy." And I realized, I believed him. For the first time in decades, I believed I deserved to be happy. Not eventually, not after I'd earned it or proved myself worthy. Right now. Just as I was. I deserved happiness. That summer was magical. Ernie and I went to concerts on the beach. We tried new restaurants. We took long walks and talked about everything and nothing. We laughed so much. God, I'd forgotten how good it felt to laugh until my stomach hurt. In August, right before we made love for the first time, Ernie said something I'll never forget. We were in my bedroom. It was late evening. The windows were open and we could hear the ocean. We'd been kissing and things were escalating and I could feel myself getting nervous. It had been years since I'd been intimate with anyone. Years since I'd been naked in front of someone who actually wanted to see me. I was 61 years old with a 61-year-old body. Gravity had done its work. Time had done its work. I started to say something self-deprecating about my body and Ernie put his finger on my lips. He said, "Trish, I want to be here. I want you. Not some fantasy version of you from 30 years ago. You. Right now. Exactly as you are." And then he said, "You're beautiful." And I believed him. Because he wasn't just talking about my body. He was talking about all of me. The woman I'd become. The person I was learning to be. The life I was building. He saw all of it and he wanted all of it. That's the difference between good love and settling. With Donald, I'd spent years feeling like I had to earn his affection, like I had to be perfect enough or good enough or quiet enough. And even then, it wasn't enough. But with Ernie, I was enough just as I was. Messy and scared and figuring it out as I went. I was enough. We made love that night and it was beautiful. Not because it was perfect. It wasn't perfect. We were both older and our bodies didn't work quite like they used to and there were awkward moments and we laughed about it. But it was real. It was honest. It was two people choosing to be vulnerable with each other. And that's what made it beautiful. The next morning, I woke up next to Ernie and I didn't have that moment of panic or regret. I just felt peaceful. Content. Happy. He was still sleeping and I lay there watching him and thinking, this is what I was looking for. Not perfection. Not fairy tale romance. Just this. Someone who sees me and wants me and makes me feel alive. My kids met Ernie officially in September, right after my divorce was finalized. I was nervous about it. I'd been dating him for 5 months, but I hadn't introduced them yet. I wanted to make sure it was serious before I brought him into their lives. Plus, I knew they were still adjusting to the divorce. I didn't want to add more change to the mix until they were ready. But by September, it felt right. Ernie was a big part of my life. We were spending most of our free time together. We'd even started talking about the future, carefully, but still talking about it. I wanted my kids to know him. Jenny met him first. She drove down from Atlanta for the weekend and I made dinner for the 3 of us. I was so nervous I burned the chicken. But Ernie was charming and kind and genuinely interested in Jenny's life. He asked her about nursing, about her work at the hospital, about her dreams and goals. He treated her like a person, not just his girlfriend's daughter. And by the end of the night, Jenny pulled me aside and said, "Mom, I like him. He's good for you." Sarah and Michael took longer to come around. Sarah especially was still angry about the divorce. She felt like I'd betrayed the family. She felt like I'd given up too easily. When she finally agreed to meet Ernie in October, she came with her walls up. She was polite but cold. She asked him pointed questions about his intentions and his past and his plans. She was protecting me, I knew that. But she was also punishing me a little. Reminding me of what I'd thrown away. Ernie handled it beautifully. He didn't get defensive. He didn't try too hard. He just answered her questions honestly and let her make up her own mind. By the end of the meal, Sarah's walls had come down a little. Not all the way. But enough. Michael met Ernie last, in November, just before Thanksgiving. Michael and Amanda came to visit and we all had dinner together. Michael was protective, like Sarah, but in a different way. He wanted to make sure Ernie wasn't taking advantage of me. He wanted to make sure I wasn't rushing into something just because I was lonely. At one point, while I was in the kitchen getting dessert, I heard Michael and Ernie talking on the balcony. Michael said, "My mom's been through a lot. She's vulnerable right now. I just want to make sure you understand that." Ernie said, "Your mom is one of the strongest people I've ever met. She's not fragile. She's brave. And I'm honored she's chosen to let me into her life." Michael told me later that's when he knew Ernie was okay. Because he saw me the way Michael wanted his mother to be seen. Not as a victim or a project, but as a whole, capable, brave woman. That Thanksgiving was different from every other Thanksgiving I'd had. Instead of hosting a big meal at the house with all the traditional dishes and all the stress, I had a small dinner at my condo. Just me, Ernie, Jenny, Michael, and Amanda. Sarah and her family were with her in-laws that year, which hurt but I understood. She needed space. She needed time. We cooked together. We laughed. We told stories. Ernie shared some of his Marine stories and had everyone in stitches. Jenny taught us all a card game she'd learned at the hospital. Michael and Amanda talked about their wedding plans. And I sat there looking around my little dining table at these people I loved and who loved me, and I thought, this is family. Not the forced, performative version I'd had for so long. But real family. Chosen family. People who see each other and support each other and show up. After dinner, while Michael and Jenny were doing dishes and Amanda was on the phone with her mom, Ernie and I went out on the balcony. It was cold for Charleston, probably in the 50s, and I was wrapped in a blanket. Ernie put his arm around me and we stood there looking at the ocean. He said, "Thank you for including me today." I said, "Thank you for being here." He said, "I know this year has been hard for you. Leaving your marriage, starting over, dealing with your kids' reactions. But I want you to know, I see how brave you've been. I see how much strength it took to choose yourself. And I'm proud of you. I started crying. Not sad crying. Happy crying. Because someone saw me. Really saw me. All of me. The scared parts and the brave parts and the messy parts. And he was proud of me. I said, I'm proud of me too. And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I was actually proud of myself. Not for what I'd accomplished or how I'd served others or how well I'd maintained the appearance of perfection. But for having the courage to blow it all up and build something real. December came, and with it, the anniversary of the Christmas when I dropped the divorce bomb. 1 year. It had been 1 year since I'd sat at that dining room table and said the words that changed everything. I thought about calling Donald. Just to check in. To see how he was doing. But I didn't. We'd been in touch through lawyers to finalize the divorce, but we hadn't had a real conversation since I moved out. I heard through Sarah that he was dating someone seriously. His dental hygienist, it turned out. They'd apparently been friends for years and got together a few months after I left. Part of me wondered if something had been going on before I left. But honestly, it didn't matter. We were both moving on. That was good. Ernie asked me how I wanted to spend Christmas. He said, we can do whatever you want. Low key, just the two of us. Big family gathering. Whatever feels right to you. I thought about it for a while. And then I knew what I wanted. I wanted my kids at my condo for Christmas. All of them. Including Sarah and her family. I wanted us to have a real Christmas together in my new space, in my new life. I wanted them to see that I was happy. That I'd made the right choice. That endings can lead to beautiful new beginnings. I called Sarah first. I expected her to say no. We still weren't totally okay. She was still processing everything. But I asked anyway. I said, I know last Christmas was awful. I know I hurt you. But I'd really love to have you and your family here for Christmas this year. No pressure. But I miss you. And I want you to see my life now. I want you to see that I'm okay. Better than okay. There was a long pause. Then Sarah said, can I bring Dave and the boys? I said, of course. She said, and can Ernie be there? I'd like to get to know him better. I said, yes. Absolutely yes. She said, okay, Mom. We'll come. I cried after I hung up. Happy tears. Grateful tears. My daughter was giving me another chance. She was willing to see my new life with open eyes instead of angry ones. Christmas came. My little condo was packed. Sarah, Dave, and the boys. Michael and Amanda, now married as of October. Jenny and the guy she was dating, a nice paramedic named Chris. And Ernie. 9 people in my 1-bedroom condo. It was chaos. It was cramped. It was absolutely perfect. We cooked together. Well, mostly the women cooked while the men played with the kids and watched football. Traditional gender roles, I know, but hey, we were all choosing to be there, choosing our roles. That's the difference. The boys opened their presents and wrapping paper went everywhere. We ate too much food. We played games. We told stories. And at one point, Sarah pulled me aside and said, Mom, I get it now. I see why you left. I see how much lighter you are. How much happier. And I'm sorry I was so angry. I was just scared. Scared of change. Scared that if you could leave Dad after 35 years, what did that mean for my marriage? But I've been working on my marriage. Really working on it. And it's better now. So thank you. For showing me that marriage takes work. That you can't just coast. I hugged her and I said, I'm so proud of you. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, various people on air mattresses and couches throughout the condo, Ernie and I stood on the balcony again. It was cold but clear. The stars were out. The ocean was calm. Ernie said, that was a good day. I said, that was a perfect day. He said, I have something for you. An early Christmas present. He pulled a small box out of his pocket. My heart started racing. Was it a ring? Were we doing this? It had only been 9 months. Was that too fast? Was I ready? I opened the box. Inside was a key. A house key. Ernie said, it's the key to my house. I want you to have it. I want you to feel like you can come and go whenever you want. I want you to feel at home with me. I'm not asking you to move in. Not yet. We can take our time with that. But I want you to know, I'm all in. I'm choosing you. Every single day, I'm choosing you. I looked at this beautiful man who saw me and valued me and chose me. And I said, I'm all in too. We kissed under the stars and I thought about how different my life was from a year ago. A year ago, I was terrified and alone and taking the biggest risk of my life. And now, I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. Not because Ernie completed me or saved me. But because I'd saved myself and then invited someone wonderful to share the life I'd built. That's the moral of my story, if there is one. You can't wait for someone else to make you happy. You can't wait for your circumstances to change. You can't wait for permission or the perfect timing or for everyone to understand and support you. You have to choose yourself. You have to save yourself. And it's scary as hell. It might be the scariest thing you ever do. But on the other side of that fear is freedom. On the other side of that guilt is peace. On the other side of that pain is a life that's actually yours. A life where you wake up and feel grateful instead of resigned. A life where you're seen and valued and chosen. A life where you're not just surviving, but thriving. I'm 62 years old now. I've been divorced for a year and a half. I have a boyfriend who makes me laugh and makes me feel beautiful and challenges me to keep growing. I have a relationship with my kids that's more honest and real than it ever was when I was pretending to be happy. I have friends who support me in adventures I never thought I'd have and a future I'm actually excited about. And it all started because I counted my husband's chews at dinner and decided I couldn't live like that anymore. So if you're counting chews, if you're going through the motions, if you're slowly disappearing inside a life that looks good on paper but feels empty in practice, please hear me. You deserve more. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve to feel alive. And it's not too late. It's never too late. You might have to blow everything up to get there. You might have to hurt people you love. You might have to face judgment and criticism and doubt. You might have to be alone for a while and figure out who you are without all the roles you've been playing. It's going to be hard. I won't lie to you. It's going to be one of the hardest things you ever do. But you can do hard things. You've already done hard things. You've survived every difficult day of your life so far. You've made it through heartbreak and loss and disappointment. You're stronger than you think you are. You're braver than you believe. And you deserve a life that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, not just a life you're enduring until you die. Choose yourself. Please. Choose yourself before it's too late. Choose yourself even if no one understands. Choose yourself even if it's messy and painful and scary. Choose yourself because you're the only one who can. And you deserve that choice. I chose myself at 61. And it saved my life. Not literally, but in every way that matters. It gave me back to myself. It gave me a second chance. It gave me hope and joy and a future worth living. What would choosing yourself look like for you? What would it mean to stop going through the motions and start actually living? What would it take for you to believe you deserve more than what you're settling for? Think about it. Really think about it. And then, when you're ready, be brave. Be so brave. Take the first step. Say the thing you've been afraid to say. Make the choice you've been too scared to make. Choose yourself. Your life is waiting for you. Your real life. The one where you're fully alive and fully yourself. It's scary on the other side of comfort. But it's also beautiful. So beautiful. And you deserve to see it. I believe in you. Even though I don't know you, I believe in you. Because if a 61-year-old grandmother who'd been married for 35 years could blow up her entire life and build something better, so can you. If I could choose myself after decades of putting everyone else first, so can you. If I could find happiness and love and peace after all those years of settling, so can you. You are not too old. You are not too stuck. You are not too anything. You are exactly where you need to be to make a different choice. And that choice starts now. Right now. In this moment. You get to decide. You get to choose. You get to say, I deserve more, and then go get it. So here's what I want you to do. After you finish listening to this story, I want you to sit with yourself for a minute. Really sit with yourself. And ask yourself honestly, am I happy? Not content, not managing, not fine. But actually happy. Am I living the life I want to live? Am I in relationships that make me feel alive? Am I being seen and valued and chosen? If the answer is yes, beautiful. Celebrate that. Honor that. Keep choosing the life that makes you happy. But if the answer is no, or I don't know, or I'm not sure, then it's time to get honest with yourself. What needs to change? What do you need to let go of? What do you need to fight for? What choice have you been avoiding because you're scared of the consequences? You don't have to know all the answers right now. You don't have to have a perfect plan. You just have to be willing to start asking the questions. You have to be willing to stop pretending everything's fine when it's not. You have to be willing to choose discomfort over slow death. And please, please know that choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. It makes you brave. It makes you human. We only get one life. One shot at this. And spending it being invisible or unhappy or resigned because it's easier than making waves is not noble. It's just sad. You deserve more than sad. You deserve joy. You deserve passion. You deserve to be with people who see you and value you and choose you every single day. You deserve a life that feels like yours, not like something you're just enduring. I found that life at 61. And every single day, I'm grateful I was brave enough to go looking for it. Every single day, I wake up in my little beachfront condo with Ernie next to me or in my own bed alone, and I feel free. Free from pretending. Free from settling. Free from slow death disguised as a good marriage. And that freedom is worth everything I had to give up to get it. Everything. So be brave, my friend. Be so incredibly brave. Your life is waiting for you. The real one. The good one. The one where you're fully alive. Go get it. You deserve it. And you can do it. I promise you can. Now, before I let you go, I want to leave you with one thing. A little reminder you can come back to whenever you need it. Whenever you're scared or doubting yourself or tempted to go back to comfortable misery. Here it is. I am worthy of being seen. I am worthy of being chosen. I am worthy of a life that makes me want to wake up in the morning. I am not too old, not too stuck, not too anything. I am exactly who I need to be to make a different choice. And I choose me. Today and every day, I choose me. I am brave enough. I am strong enough. I am worthy enough. And my life, my real life, starts now. Say it with me. I choose me. I choose me. I choose me. Okay, beautiful soul. That's my story. The story of how I broke the silence. How I chose myself. How I found freedom on the other side of fear. I hope it helped you somehow. I hope it made you think. I hope it gave you permission to want more. If this story resonated with you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps other people find this story who might need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, rate this story 1 to 10. But more importantly, tell me where you are in your journey. Are you still in the before, counting chews at dinner? Are you in the middle, trying to find the courage to make a change? Or are you in the after, living your real life? I want to hear from you. And hey, if you're here right now, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching this from. I love knowing that my story is reaching people all over the world at all times of day and night. Drop your location and the time in the comments. Let's build a community of brave people who are choosing themselves. Subscribe to Drama Coda if you haven't already. Because I have more stories to share. Next time, I'm going to tell you about my friend Linda from book club. Remember her, the one who left her cheating husband? Her story is wild. It involves a private investigator, a burner phone, and the most satisfying revenge I've ever heard of. You're going to love it. So subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, remember. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be chosen. You deserve to feel alive. And it's never too late to start choosing yourself. Be brave, beautiful soul. Your real life is waiting for you. This is Trish, signing off. Choose yourself. Always choose yourself.